All right, cool. Hi, everyone. My name's Domenic Rizzolo, and I'm going to be presenting today. My talk is called A Place to Hang Our Hats. It's about security, community, and culture. And feel free to tweet at me. I don't really check my Twitter, but if you want to insult me and feel better about yourself or leave any kind of feedback or tell me how cute I look in my corporate chill shirt, you can let me know on there. I'm at not Domenic. So let's get started, because these things tend to run kind of long. So a little bit of disclosure first. As I said, I'm a corporate shill. I work at Duo Security out of Ann Arbor, Michigan, so everything I'm saying is lies, and you can't take anything seriously because I'm trying to sell you something all the time. I'm actually an intern. I'm only 21. This is my first ever con, visiting or speaking. It's my first time to Vegas, being 21. Yeah, it's been pretty exciting. I was hoping not to have a hangover moment this morning and end up in the middle of the desert. But I'm here, so very happy to be here. And I go to University of Michigan, so I am a third-year computer science student there. So a little bit of background on myself. I am kind of a noob, I'm going to be honest. The first time I used the internet was in 1999 to get onto neopets.com, a cool website my sister showed me, where you could play with toy animals online. So I'm not really an old-school BBS guy. I never fiddled with a modem. So I come in with a very unique perspective. And what I want to bring to B-Sides is kind of a talk about what security, community, and culture look like to somebody who's completely an outsider. You know, somebody who didn't know what frack was until their boss berated them for a half hour over lunch about not knowing what frack was. So that's the kind of experience I kind of wanted to bring to this con. And kind of, you know, it's easy to say, like, oh, kids these days don't know what they're talking about, or script kiddies don't know what they're doing. And so I kind of took some time to figure out, you know, what has been going on the past 15, 20 years in the security community. So where I started out on a research project at the University of Michigan called Cyber Warfare History Project. And if the word cyber is throwing up a red flag for you, I've gotten to that point too. So what that involved was reading every New York Times and Washington Post article ever with the word cyber in it, and looking for ones about cyber warfare and logging the experts and the actors mentioned in them. So that was very interesting. It went back actually all the way to the 70s, and, you know, you have all this ridiculous stuff in there that, you know, I would never think to speak on as an authority now, you know, because it's so untrue and it's so exaggerated by the media. But it was really interesting and kind of got my interest piqued in kind of the InfoSec community in general. And so I've kind of moved on. I'm kind of a noob expert now, so I'm like elite noob. So I know all about logic bombs. I'm a pretty smart dude. But I think it's really interesting. So if you're looking at all the media reporting on the InfoSec community, kind of up to the 90s and the early 2000s, before people realized how much money they could make off the security community, and, you know, Forbes started talking about every data breach. It was kind of this idea of the lone wolf hacker or the group that's hacking, you know, and they're going to take down the entire internet, and they're going to bunk May East and May West, and then we're all going to die in flames, you know. So reading this kind of stuff as a total outsider, you kind of think this is true, and you do get scared and you do get spooked, and it's so ridiculous now at this point thinking about that. But if we take a look at the narrative here, we're kind of like, okay, yeah, sure, that's totally accurate. No one thinks that's inaccurate. So I wrote up a little algorithm on if reporting is good and if it's, you know, on InfoSec reporting. And kind of my thoughts on it are, like, we can talk a lot about the failings of the media. You know, we can talk about people who are writing articles about technology aren't tech literate. They're more interested in kind of making a fast news day than they're interested in, you know, reporting accurate facts. You know, a lot of media reporting is getting people to click on your clickbait. So you can throw out some headline that's Russian hackers have 1.2 billion passwords, and, you know, it doesn't matter if they've cracked the hash. We'll just throw that out there because that will get you scared and changing all your passwords and make you click on our link. So there are some pretty big fundamental problems with the way that hacking and hacking groups are reported on in the media. Sidebar, In this presentation, I'm going to try my best to avoid the terms that I've been told not to use. So cyber, console cowboy was one of my favorites. I thought that's what everyone called themselves, but apparently not. Authentication is not a thing. Go figure. And then cracker, just to avoid any slur confusion. So also cyber Pearl Harbor, I have to say, of everything I did doing all my research for this talk, reading about people, Leon Panetta declaring the big risk of cyber Pearl Harbor was maybe my favorite. So if we look at actual kind of groups and forces behind, I guess, driving security culture, one of the big ones that people of the time or people who came afterwards have read about or know about is LOD and MOD, right? This was all over the news. This was all over 2600 meetings and the BBS boards. This was like a big feud that apparently wasn't a feud, that, you know, people were hacking back and forth, and it kind of set off the media firestorm of, oh, look, we can say cyber conflicts are, it's like gangs. Oh, they have gangs, they have names. They're calling themselves after supervillains. So it became very easy to sensationalize in the media. The DOJ kind of going after young guys who were using the internet, maybe not for totally nefarious purposes, but to try to get as much information as they could, was also a precursor to kind of the craze over hacking and hackers. And then moving into the 2000s, you have groups like, LulzSec and Anonymous throwing flame wars at people, taking down their websites. You have the Syrian Electronic Army. You have groups like Woo Woo Loft and whichever group that you think it's egregious that I didn't talk about specifically, kind of, at least from a media perspective, epitomizing this idea that, oh, our kids are getting together and, taking down websites and hurting the economy, when that actually wasn't necessarily what was always going on. So this is kind of my guiding question for the rest of the presentation, and it's, are we seeing significant changes and declines in hacker culture and the size of the hacking community? And I'm talking about, not like somebody running scripts to try to steal your credit card or somebody copying a DEF CON talk to try to skim their local ATM. I'm kind of talking about people who contribute information and share information across the community. And is that community kind of decreasing, at least in the number of people who are open and totally in it just to share information? So here's my proposal that kind of growth in, oh man, excellent. Sorry guys. That growth in the security community. Yeah, as an intern, I've had about 13 different kinds of software installed on my computer and phone to make sure I don't get owned. So that's the first of many, probably. So growth in the security community has changed values and its makeups, and the growth I'm talking about specifically is corporate growth. So growth of, so-called white hat or pen testing organizations. That have kind of, why would you be in a hacker collective or a hacker group when you could just be in a sort of corporate group making money off of it? Growth in kind of law enforcement, they're never quite ahead of the curve, but at least awareness of, what they can prosecute and expanded powers of what they can prosecute. And then kind of growth in the population of the field in general has made there so many actors that there aren't really these heroic groups anymore that you see and you're like, oh, these are the big hacker groups. So people kind of don't associate with each other as much. So let's dive into that. If you think that's total bull, I'd love to hear about it. So this is a map from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And these are security analysts by state, except for Wyoming, because apparently there aren't computers in Wyoming anymore. So this is of May 2013 of people who self-identified as being security analysts. So as you can see, states with larger populations, and it's not surprising the distribution of people working in the security industry. So you do see, not concentrations in states that have huge natural resources like Montana, Idaho, North Dakota, South Dakota, and you do see a lot in kind of these traditional, like, tech-savvy market states. And so as far as salary concerned, it's a very similar picture, right? So you're going to see a lot of people working in this InfoSec community in big states like California, Washington. You have a lot in New Mexico, Illinois, and then around the D.C. area and kind of up the tech belt on the East Coast, which is really unsurprising that the people who have, the states, that have the highest mean wages for InfoSec community are the ones that are often associated with tech community in general. So kind of what I took from this is that a lot of people who are working in and around tech and have been working in and around hacking traditionally are, staying in the same areas, and they're working for companies now because, there aren't this many people making money off the InfoSec community, making this much money off the InfoSec community, instead of, hanging around on Friday nights with their friends trying to break into Ma Bell's system. Another interesting corollary is kind of the map of where the concentrations of mean incomes are the highest for InfoSec workers. Is pretty similar to some of the early ARPANET maps, right? So you have a lot of places that are focused around big research universities like Stanford, like Northwestern University of Chicago, like UVA. So all of these states that, have the best people in InfoSec are also where a lot of the earliest people using computers and trying to hack into networks were. So I thought that was really interesting. It's not proof. It's just interesting. So another field of growth we've seen is the FBI. So the FBI has seen over a 350% growth in its support staff over the period of the 90s. So the 90s is kind of, depending on who you ask, a time that the internet started to become, and hacking and became less of a Wild West than it was. Obviously, if you ask somebody who started in the 90s, they'd say, oh, the 90s was the Wild West. You talk to somebody who was out at MIT in the 70s, they'd say, oh, the 70s were the Wild West. But you saw significant growth in kind of the intelligence officers who are non-field. So this isn't like Mulder and Scully. These are the people sitting behind the computers supplying information. So the demand for intelligent workers who can use computers effectively has gone up, as well as kind of their resources to pursue people who are operating outside the law using those same kind of techniques. Also, the FBI during this period had very important jobs like chasing down dangerous gangs like the Juggalos, who were classified as gang by the FBI. We've also seen huge growth in the NSA over the past decade. That's General Keith Alexander. It's his personal portrait right there. But 11,000 new employees were hired over the decade plus 3 years, so that's Baker's dozen years. But the Fort Meade facility, actually, where the NSA is located, is actually now larger than the Pentagon, and the budget has doubled over that same time period. Something that was very interesting to me, too, is the number of private contracting companies has gotten much larger. It's looking at like most recent numbers, it's almost tripled since before 9/11. So you're looking around somewhere from 600 to 700 private contracting companies alone for the NSA. And I think that's interesting because, again, we're looking at companies that are hiring people who are doing InfoSec. Even if you're not specifically, doing crypto, if you're working for the NSA, you're going to need a staff of security people if you're a private contractor. And I don't think that's ever gone badly for anyone. I don't think anyone's ever had a private contractor kind of go rogue on them for the NSA. So it's a pretty profitable field. My C word is up there again. I'm sorry about that. But this is a graph of kind of what has been prosecuted or identified as cybercrime. And these are from the IC3 reports. But what I think is really interesting is if you look at the time period over which it's kind of exploded into some exponential growth. Oh yeah, cyber. That was my apology. You'll see it kind of coincides with some of the strengthening and original passing of a lot of these laws targeted at cybercrimes, right? So you have the CFAA, you have the USA Patriot Act, which was mind-blowing to figure out that that's actually an acronym. So some poor congressional intern had to come up with language to hop over to make USA Patriot an acronym. Probably a pretty strong backronym. So if you kind of think about the time period in which these started to be enforced by federal judges, it's not that there's a lot more people hacking over this period. It's that suddenly, businesses are saying, hey, we can report this for a loss. Hey, we can collect insurance on this. Let's report it as a crime because, now we actually know that it's going on, too. It's not going undetected in our systems. And, yeah. So on the left is the graph of the kind of prosecutions in federal court over the CFAA Act. And a big example is kind of Guccifer on the right. So those of you that don't know, he was pretty elite. He got into some AOL email accounts associated with the Bush family. and he released some of George Bush's personal oil paintings. So this is the homie Vladimir Putin right here, in a pretty accurate depiction. So punishment, kind of the punishment versus the rewards has kind of decreased greatly over this period of being associated with hacking in groups. So if we're kind of looking at this, we've seen a big kind of a boon of InfoSec jobs, of tools that we have. More people are relying on security infrastructure, and to be frank, a lot of people are relying on poor security infrastructure. Disclosure has become more frequent. So wouldn't we expect to see, more hacking collectives like the Loft? Wouldn't we expect to see kind of a resurgence of the hacker group as a part of the mainstream culture? So something I think that takes away from that is this idea of cybercrime. So organized crime syndicates, and even state-sponsored, have taken on a lot of hackers as assets. So big examples are coming out of Eastern Europe. I actually had a conversation with somebody out of the FBI Chicago field office, and I was asking him, what do you guys see as your biggest threats in the InfoSec community? And he's saying organized crime in Russia, because it's organized by, the Russian Eastern European oligarchy, and we can't do anything to touch them, unless they end up in Spain or a country that, will extradite them to us. So we kind of see this almost gladiatorial backing of specific hackers or hacking groups by very strong organizations. That's kind of taken down the level of, cowboys of the internet. We've also seen growth in a lot of tools that are anonymity focused, which kind of disincentivizes strong kind of open group collaboration, which seems counterintuitive, but every time a new tool comes up, it's usually less than a year before, a big gaping vulnerability is exposed. And people who have been in the realm for a while know that you really, look at LulzSec, you need one leak for your whole ship to go down. So it's very hard to build trust in the current atmosphere. This is, not funny. This is embarrassing now. I'm sorry. Okay. Another thing is the growth of responsible disclosure. So kind of the old, crackers and sneakers, not the people who are pursuing information, but the people who kind of like to play around and try to break software, now honestly have legitimate cracking and sneaking avenues, right? So looking at bug bounty specifically, the most profitable bug bounty I found, not to be too specific, but it was over 3.877 intern summer salaries. Which is a lot. So if I found one of these bugs, I could be not working for 3 summers and, lying back in the great beaches of Traverse City. And also, we see kind of an idea of the 90s and the 80s, since it's a lot of very technical, literate, young people doing a lot of the hacking, which I think is really interesting. And having discussions with some people at this con and talking to people over the internet, a lot of people have kind of, said, look, I had a lot of fun breaking software, I had a lot of fun running the systems and using, my red box, but, I got married, or I had kids, or, I had to take care of my parents. So you kind of see a lot of people growing up and saying, the risk really isn't worth the reward anymore. So less teenage angst. But, you kind of have to say, they're still teenagers. What's happened to that? So a big avenue I see is kind of enterprise, especially as a student at a university. So I think a lot of young people now who are tech literate and interested in computers have very easy avenues to either get into a university with a good scholarship or jump immediately to Silicon Valley, right? We kind of see this cesspool of people conglomerating there, fighting for $3,000, 20 square foot apartments. And on the college scenes and around these big research universities where you started to see the first kind of hacker groups form, now you see big things like hackathons or student entrepreneurial associations that are trying to get kids right into the money. They've realized there's so much money in this. Why do we even have to pursue all the way? I don't care if I can break into somebody's system. I can just start making money right away. This is a lot easier than skimming off credit cards, So I think that's a big contributor to why there's kind of, you see older audiences at a lot of these cons, walking around. There aren't a ton of young people. And there are definitely some of us who are interested and, who've got interested, but you don't see kind of the huge youth interest that you would see at 2600 meetings or things like that. Of course, there will always be people who are very interested in trolling. This is one of my favorite examples of one of those kind of huge troll bug bounty emails. You get, you're never going to totally get rid of the community that was originally there to bother people and to rustle jimmies and to say, hey, we're better than you, we're so elite. But I think we've seen a big decline, and I think that's a problem that we should be discussing. So just want to say thank you to a couple of my coworkers. Chris is here in the audience. Mark Stanislav's here. They're pretty awesome. And I want to also say thank you to kind of everyone here, because through interviews, through talking to people, through meeting people here at the convention, people have been very patient with me. I know, I may totally be way off in some of my assumptions. You may think I'm a huge idiot, but I haven't met anyone who's been openly adversarial, which has been really nice. No one's thrown anything at me yet. And it's, how accepting the community is, I think, is a really great kind of pointer to me to say, like, this is something I would love to be involved in, because people are so accepting and so intelligent and so willing to share their time and resources. So I'm sure you have questions, comments, heckles, so let's get down to it. Are there any questions?